Okay, and here we go. So, good evening, everybody. This is the Morbid Symptoms Podcast, and I'm Dr. Tara Van Dyke. And it's the evening where I'm at, but good morning, good afternoon, etc. If you're in the United States, sounds weird to say happy Black Friday. And for those of you who don't know, it's when everybody who has a long weekend because of Thanksgiving, tries to get all those first Christmas season bargains. Although I have seen it also, a bit off topic, but I remember when I lived in Holland, it surprised me that they had Black Friday there. And they also have it here, although I'm not sure how successful that is. Anyway, I digress. So the morbid symptom we're going to talk about tonight is what we're calling the Israel-Palestine derangement syndrome. And I'm very happy to have with me today Maya, who has a background in psychotherapy and political science, and also, if I remember correctly, a trauma expert. And we met on Twitter. Well, I guess you can meet on Twitter, and we kind of commiserated over how many people who we were following and who we were, seemed like all of a sudden overnight to become spokespersons for the IDF, and that was just kind of discombobulating for us. And we've commiserated off and on with some of the more, let's just say, eyebrow-raising comments that people who we used to follow either on topics of COVID or the Ukraine war or gender identity ideology critique, who seem very rational, very balanced, very level-headed, very focused on the evidence and not jumping to conclusions. And that seemed to all go out the window with this particular issue. And so if you would, I'm going to bring up Maya now. And if you could, if you want to say a couple of, if you want to say a couple of things, that would be great.
Hello, Tara. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, it'd be great to have a conversation together. As you said, it's been very puzzling, dynamics which have taken place over the last few weeks. A bit about me. So I worked for the past 20 plus years as a clinician. And prior to this, I used to work as a researcher. So I have a background in research and also just on the ground working with people. And my interest in how this caught my, let's say, my dedicated in attention was really on the basis of work that I've done with refugee women and work that I've done with people that have experienced intergenerational trauma, and also having knowledge of the conflict over time. So, yeah, basically I've been brought up, a little bit about me personally, I've been brought up in what is considered very multicultural environment, where differences were seen as strength, something that, possibly people will associate with what they call social justice warriors. That's not my view. Yeah, as you know, the anti-woke mob have that, their view, which I think in a way dismisses a lot of the importance of actually understanding diversity and what that means in reality in relationship with people, right? And so, my interest has always been in social dynamics and bigger picture. And that's why I guess we're here.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And it's been a bit of back and forth because there's quite a big time difference between us. That's and then we were supposed to do this, was it Friday? And then I had a sick kid. But anyway, we're here now. And I guess that's the thing about when you're doing your own podcast, you get to make your own schedule. Anyway, so Israeli-Palestine derangement syndrome, I'll just say a bit about what that term means to me. And of course, this is just my way of getting around this phenomena of people, like I said before, who I didn't, this is kind of cliche to say, everyone has to say this now, I didn't agree with them on everything. However, I took them seriously. I felt them to be honest, fairly honest, as honest as you can be, brokers, very reasonable, rational people. And so just to see the reaction to this flare up again in the Israel-Palestine after October 7th has been just trying to figure out what this means. And I'm taking this from what I don't know if it traveled outside the United States, but they had this, there was a thing called Trump derangement syndrome. And originally it was something on the Republicans and conservatives would accuse people, you know, Democrats and people on the other people on the left of. And basically I'm just kind of, instead of, I'm taking out Trump and putting in Israel-Palestine and adding a couple of other things. And so basically how I see it, and I'll just go through quickly this, how I see this, well, what I'm calling the, you know, this derangement, this new derangement syndrome. And then you can tell me what you, give me any, then I'll like to hear what you have to say about it. So basically there's an unwillingness or an incapacity to regard Palestinians as fully human and to recognize their resistance as a resistance, as a resistance to Israeli occupation. There seems to be this holy swallowing of the idea that Hamas is terrorist and that everything, and then that eclipses everything. And then also, so that's part of the Palestinian side. And then on the Israeli side, incapacity and unwillingness to confront Israel's policies and actions vis-a-vis the Palestinians, and combined with that, the racist, outright fascist elements of Zionism that contradict their cherished narrative. And I'm bringing cherished narrative because I'm thinking that because there's certain things that people don't mind being, no one likes to be embarrassed or to make mistakes necessarily. But if I have a wrong idea, I get different information. Okay, I change my view, fine. But there seems to be a hesitance, almost an inability to take in this information that contradicts the idea that Israel is good, Hamas is bad, and by proximity, the Palestinians are also somehow suspect and aren't afforded the same rights and appreciations as other people are. And also there seems to be this historic amnesia, but that everything in between Israel and Palestine started on October 7th, but somehow maybe before that everything was working out fine, and then Hamas decided to conduct a raid. And then the last thing is that these people really, really need everyone to condemn Hamas, and not just once, but it seems like every time this topic comes up, it seems almost like a pathological or some sort of anxiety thing about the need to for everyone to heartily condemn Hamas. So this is kind of like my working concept of how to understand, and not understand why this is the case, but to put a name on the empirical phenomena, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Look, okay, so it's really a rich topic, and there's so much that one could say, and we don't have all day to look into it. But one of the things that I've observed is very much the conflating a lot of issues, and which then brings up a lot of confusion where people do not have the knowledge around the topic, or knowledge around how does propaganda work, how our primal fears and visceral reactions when we are bombarded with the relentless propaganda. And obviously, just what people, what is referred as cognitive bias around, different issues. The other dynamic we need to keep in mind is the one of in-group and out-group. And that's where you see the exceptionalism, meaning that if you are in my group, you have to be good, and you're certainly good. And I don't want to kind of depict that in any other way. And I need an out-group. And the out-group to be, where all the evil and all the bad things that I fear the most sit. I'm simplifying things. Yeah, I'm simplifying things, but pretty much that's what I've been seeing from the very beginning. And I go back to, okay, so first, before I forget, do you condemn Hamas is pretty much as...
Oh, Maya, I forgot to ask you that question. You condemn Hamas?
So you ask it...
Sorry.
It's pretty much like, the bend in the knee, what we saw with, BLM and all this, that was highly criticized by the same people that now ask you over and over to condemn something. They were the first one to criticize the bend in the knee. This fascinating dynamic. And And I go back to pretty much what we were, a group of people, and we know the main influences and, characters or actors.
Mm-hmm.
That idea, and I'm just can also, just mention something from Pluckrose, for instance, and Lindsay. But that idea that it's not good enough to be, not racist. You need to be anti-racist. And that was also highly criticized. And to me, all this condemned Hamas is pretty much in terms of same theme, same dynamic. They're using exactly the same tactics. There's nothing different in terms of what they are applying to people and forcing people. It's an imposition in terms of course, I guess most level-headed people and, will condemn any act of violence. I speak for myself, violence is violence. I don't actually see it with different kind of, I don't have much nuance around violence, although I can understand what can bring people to violence. That is something else. The understanding doesn't mean the condoning. Okay, so there's been a lot of confusion also, kind of spinning and making people again react. And we've seen that with Norman Finkelstein the other day when he had that interview, and it was highly misinterpreted.
Speaking of this, this is just not for you, because of this. I'm glad you brought that up. And which is interesting is when you brought up the Primrose and Lindsay, is that Lindsay, I'm quite sure, is probably wanting everybody to condemn Hamas. I haven't at least everybody else in that group seems to be all not really able to see what they were. Again, this is the hypocrisy. They're not able to see that they're doing the exact same thing they were condemning, and even even in sometimes more intensely, just so this rabid need that everybody has to declare their side, or again. And I know that and I think you're right. It's all about control, because most people know that if you ask them, okay, are you for terrorism? Most people are going to go, yeah, no. But there's those of us who want to be like, hold on a second, we're not going to let you cast this whole thing as that, because terrorism is an action, and Israel engages in terrorism a lot. The United States government, so it's this idea that. Do they really think that all these people? Do they really think, like, for example, Norman Finkelstein is a fan of terrorism? But it's this idea that I think it's about control, about controlling the narrative, to make sure that we start off everything with the implicit, if not explicit, notice that we know who the bad actor is here and who to blame is here, who the already guilty instigator is here. So there's that kind of sets the tone. And then also, if you don't answer correctly, then we can feel free to smear you as, a self-hating Jew. Right here in the thing in the slide, critics have labeled Finkelstein poison and a self-hating Jew. Now, someone made the decision to put that by in there. Yeah. And it's become a joke, at least mostly it's like, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? People can be holding, and then Pierce, who doesn't care apparently, even put out a promotion thing here yesterday that Piers Morgan asked controversial Jewish scholar if he condemns Hamas.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure you did. And it's so, it's all about the subtext. I think it's fascinating in this, because it's all about, we could talk about this question all day long, and it doesn't get at part of the problem, or half the battle, this is a cliche, half the battle is getting at the right questions. And do you condemn Hamas does not help either understand how we got to where we got, or what to do about it, how to resolve it. We could all take a poll, and let's say that 85 or 95% of us said, okay, fine, we condemn Hamas. What changes on the ground? Absolutely nothing. If anything, it gets worse, because then you've justified the thing that Israel is just protecting itself. They have this crazy terrorist group who just wants to kill them for no reason, and therefore we have to be okay with these extreme circumstances. And I think that maybe I'm reading too much into this catechistic thing, this obligatory entry into what suitable conversation is. But anyway, if you have anything else you want to add about what is Hamas, or not what is Hamas, but Hamas ritual.
I'm actually more interested in dynamics that underplaying all the, what we see unfolding and the level of really vile exchanges that happen on Twitter and also other media outlets. Well, okay, the first thing that comes to mind listening to you was very much in terms of you can present something, you can share something. And again, it depends if the person listening to you, the level of contempt they hold against you. So if you're held in contempt, it doesn't matter what you're saying, you'll be misunderstood or you'll be mischaracterized and misinterpreted. Okay, so that's one thing. And people will read into what you're saying, whatever suits their narrative or their character assassination of you.
Okay.
So that's one level, and that's why, as I said, for instance, understanding what is underlining a dynamic, it doesn't mean that you don't condemn violence. They are two different things. To conflate them is actually really, to me, says more about the person that does that rather than the person that is actually showing and understanding at a human level what could happen and why it happens, which can explain something, which we need to understand. I think, most of us, you need to understand how do things unfold, mostly if you want to prevent them and avoid them. If people are working seriously towards relationship and peacemaking.
If I could just, I could just pause you there for a second.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really upsets me about this is people are just, I don't know if they just conveniently forget, but, I'll just use my country as an example. I don't live there now, but the United States, it's like, we're quite a violent country, and also, if you look at just in terms of the military and our, and yet on the sanctions and you had all this stuff, the idea, it's just so weird how when it's other people's violence, somehow there's this thing like, there's like when Piers Morgan was talking to, I don't think it was, I'll use him as an example. It wasn't Norm Finkelstein, but Andrew Tate. And he was like, just on his high horse, like, there's never any excuse for terrorism. There's never any excuse for it. I'm like, let's look back at the UK situation. Like the UK, the government or other entities have never used violence for political purposes to push their agenda, to subjugate, to what, and the States is the same thing. It's like, we can talk about, the carpet bombing of Cambodia. We can talk about I know people know. But it's like all of a sudden this idea that we're pure and angels and somehow our violence or the violence is done in our name or by our state or whatever is somehow different than when Hamas engages in a raid in Israel to take prisoners in order to exchange for some of the thousands of prisoners that are held without trial in Israel. It's just like, and people must know. This is the thing about this. I don't know what to call this, if it's just in-group, out-group, or just how we like to lie to ourselves. But the people who are doing this, they are very aware of the record of the United States and the UK militarily and sanction-wise. And you go back into, before World War II to World War I, and then, imperialism, colonialism, all that stuff. These people are aware of it. But for somehow, I don't know if it's us, it's, not really as violent, or the people aren't really as dead, or that's not, this is also what's fascinating. Maybe one thing, if you came from a culture or a society that didn't have any blood on its hands or any, black, skeletons in the closet. And if you yourself had been speaking out against the violence that has been brought upon the Palestinians, other groups, then okay. But just this kind of, I think about Piers as an example, just he was so indignant, so self-righteous. And it's like, didn't your country have the biggest empire ever? I don't get it. Is it just about, wanting to believe the fairy tale, or I don't know.
Yeah, look, again, I see again so many different layers of what you're saying in terms of, just one of the first things that comes to mind is if you read Hoffa's True Believers, he points out, or actually
True Believers by who?
Hoffa, Eric Hoffa.
Oh, okay. And people listening, any people we mentioned specifically, I'll make a note and I'll put it in the link for people who want to look it up. So I'll make a note of that. So sorry, go ahead.
So it refers a lot to, really to the individual identification with the group, and that becomes really important in terms of cohesion, in terms of if something happens, you then are part of something and you have that sense of being supported by something, going back to the in-group and out-group. And I would say this is really evident when we look at, what is referring, to some Zionist or, the Jew community, the Jewish community. You see really very much this sense of needed and cohesion and being together. And otherwise, there's been retaliation towards people that, take or have a dissenting voice. So that is one thing. The other thing that came to mind that has been also quite interesting to observe is that while we tend to demonize and dehumanize people that, and we want to make a group of people look as lesser, given that the Nazis have come up a lot in this past few weeks.
Hamas is the Nazis. Yes.
Most of them were impeccable.
I don't believe that. It's just, what I've been
but most of them were polished and impeccable. Yeah. So again, just like that's what we often, and they've done the most humanizing, actions and conduct and violence. And you could say the same of, any other group that presents itself as being superior in any way. That's that impeccability and untouchability that often we forget to actually notice when we make that, when we want to make observations or comments about that in terms of it's very easy to demonize the other and making them look lesser and then attribute to them the most vile of atrocities, when in reality, as you were saying, it is not always so. We know that the highest, as we're saying, possibly most governments are the worst terrorists that we know. Yeah.
They just call it like democracy promotion or protecting women or.
And I know that this, and I know
the world from Putin and who knows what, but yeah. Sorry. I just wanted to flag. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. You go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to flag Julie Bindel here. You're familiar with Julie Bindel. She's a bit of a feminist treasure in the UK, and she's been, probably, 30 years or so for women's and children's rights, and trying to get the government to and the authorities to respond better to complaints of rape and sexual violence, and also very much a campaign against prostitution and whatnot. And anyway, but this is from her. This is October 7th, so this is the day it happened. And she shot out this tweet: refusing to condemn Hamas is one of the worst examples of ignorance and cultural relativism at the moment. And I would say that her putting out this tweet is an example of ignorance and cultural relativism, actually, or chauvinism. I mean, at this point, she had no idea what would happen. And although this is the thing about the cognitive dissonance, and I'm sure that, I probably do this too. Maybe I'm just, in denial when it's me. But she very well knows, Julie Bindel is a very smart woman. She knows about propaganda. She knows about states spinning things a certain way. And I don't know her background, but I was really just so confident at October 7th to shoot out this tweet. I was thinking, okay. It just was really, I didn't know. I was like, all right. And then if I could just, because this is an example, I'll just use one, because I was trying to think of what tweets to pull up to refresh my memory. And so this was October 7th. This is before I was aware of how many people moonlit as IDF spokespeople that I had been following on other issues. So, I responded to her. I'm not going to read through all this, but I just wanted to bring up that, is it not false to equate the occupier violence with the violence of those resisting occupation to liberate themselves? It's clear in who the David and Goliath is. And I mentioned that, why are the vast majority silent about day-to-day violence and indignities of the 60-plus-year occupation, including when the occupying forces critically mow the lawn, etc. I just kind of basically, my position, and that, it seems unrealistic to expect Palestinians to be superhuman. I think Noam touches on this as well. It's the idea they're supposed to just take what their situation is, and also then not have any ill will or feelings about the Israelis is an odd expectation. So I just mentioned that a punished, humiliated, and terrorized population will resist, and it's too bad for the establishment opinion that they just didn't accept their fate and go off to suffer and die in silence in the open air prison, right? And just mention other things, but and I attached to this a threshold cross, which is by a human rights organization in I think it's based in Tel Aviv, which basically says apartheid is this. And then there, very empirical analysis of this is indications of apartheid, and basically how Israel has crossed all of them, etc. So it wasn't just me saying this. And if I'll just share with you some of the responses that I got.
Just say something. My view on this is that even just focusing too much on Hamas is actually taking away from the suffering of people, Palestinians. It's actually still part of that propaganda that then dehumanizes.
Yeah.
Hamas is this abstract entity. We are not actually, there are thousands and over 2 million people suffering, displaced, and all the relatives and friends and family, they're overseas, they're in anguish. And suffering. So, to me, even just focusing too much on Hamas, whatever it takes away from, Hamas has been used as pretty much, the key from which to unleash a relentless propaganda or dehumanizations of everyday people, a lot of them which haven't even, if you want to really hold Hamas as a terrorist group, whatever people want to do with it, I'm actually not too attached to it. But a lot of them haven't even voted for that government. And that government has been put in place by Israel and the United States. But anyway, one doesn't need to go too much into it, I would say, at this point in time, but to look at how that concept, though that group of, let's say, terrorist group or whatever you want to call it, I think it's been very much used to totally take away the attention from the brutal, ruthless displacement and murdering of civilians. And that's where I get really, really disconcerted. That's what to me is really troubling, how people have been played against each other and against the entire population to call for its extermination on the basis of this folk devil that has been given to them. And then everything else is just, this demon, this monster. And they're all monsters. I took notes of what is the, so I need to remember his name. It was quite obscene, I think, what he wrote, and repugnant. The defense minister, a current advisor to the defense minister.
Of Israel.
Yes.
Okay.
About, something along the line, to paraphrase, that all mothers should also basically be killed so that their house is destroyed so that they will not give birth to more snakes. How is acceptable?
Yeah, and this is and this is the thing that I could stop you there. This is what, in terms of the people not, when I mentioned one of the characteristics of this Israel-Palestine derangement syndrome, is that it's not just us saying that. You can share people what Israel's officials are saying, what they're doing, and even then, it's still just, they can't accept the fact. It's like they can't. Somehow that doesn't seep in. And just along the lines of that, there was another. I think it was Benjamin Netanyahu's spokesperson that called Palestinian babies ticking time bombs. It's quite clear that they would kill as many Palestinians as they could, babies, unborn babies. It's quite clear, and people want to think that we're and when we're trying to bring up what they're saying, what we can see them saying and doing, they'll be like, oh, they'll accuse us, or you're just trying to you're just trying to not have to focus on Hamas, so you don't have to, deal with how you're, supporting this group. They really have to hold on to Hamas. And it's just the most amazing thing about, you're showing them, this is what the Israelis are saying, and this is what they're doing. And it's the most racist, fascist stuff, clearly genocidal at this point. And yet it doesn't break through with people like Douglas Murray. Julie Bindel hasn't said anything, hasn't retracted anything. And Colin Wright is just way off the reservation. I mean, he just basically repeats anything that he hears from, I don't know. It just sounds, there's no difference between what Colin Wright is tweeting and what that we're getting from the IDF tweet or their spokespeople. And it's just like, it doesn't seem to matter what they say, or not what us, but what Israelis say or what they do. They're just, holding on to this. And if I could, I think I want to very much flag what you also said, is that I do agree that the more we focus on Hamas, the better that is for Netanyahu and his regime, because they want us to be focusing on that, like you said, not all the other stuff that's going on under this guise of self-defense. And also that classifying them as a terrorist organization, which I would not do. I classify as an armed resistance group. Have they engaged in terroristic acts? Yeah, suicide bombing during the Second Intifada. Obviously that was to terrorize the population. But I would, they're an armed resistance movement. But to classify them as a terrorist justifies this extreme military action, not just towards them, but like you mentioned, towards the Palestinians, that somehow everything is tainted by this. So it seems that that things like with the comments that you mentioned, that I mentioned, normally people you think would be more up in arms about just get passed away. Well, they're traumatized from October 7th or something. They'll make any kind of excuse for it. And it's just, and that is really upsetting to me, because then I think sometimes I want to make excuses like, well, they just don't know, or they're uninformed, or they're propagandized. But it could very well be that some of these people they're not stupid. They could know and just not care. They're just fine with it. That's another possibility that I think we have to accept as well. That some, obviously it's not that, that some people are just A-okay with this. It's not because they don't know. It's because they don't care. And then what do you do with that is just, a shock. Anyway, I don't know if you have anything. My rant.
Look, that could be again different reasons, as you said. Like, yes, some people, could just prefer to stay in that bubble, and it doesn't touch them, or so they think. And that's, delusional thinking that something that happens somewhere else will never, have any consequences on you somewhere else. Or it could be, as we were saying, contempt, ingrained prejudice. That could be from what I've seen, very blatant racism, which is also then, trickling, down from, institutions into individual conduct
but just how proudly they can do it now. Just openly. Also just how open it is. This is when people say this, and it's not like they're, not welcome in polite society. It's like, it's okay to be all right with, it's like, well, human shields, well,
to be that open and to be so brazen. My view is to be so open. It was already there. It just, is now given the green light to, to be more openly expressed. Otherwise, my sense would be that people would kind of, step back, possibly be in shock, and then, giving themselves time to reflect and observe, and perhaps, learn more about, what's really going on here. What's really taking place. The fact that you jump straight away into such harsh judgment and prejudice towards another, I'm inclined to say that it was already there. For whatever reason, already,
And speaking of which, this was on October 8th too, and this is what really I was like, I hadn't heard this stuff since September 11th back in my own country. And I don't have this whole exchange, but this woman, I think it's a woman, it's a anonymous account, was just, you know, well, you would speak differently if you actually had to live with Islamic men or something like that. And so that I felt that she was saying that that she was being realist, and I just mentioned that I lived in Gaza for 2 years and other you know, Muslim majority areas in Mumbai. I've been in Indonesia before, and that I don't find Islamophobia rational but pathological. Because she said, you know, I'm a realist, as you will be if you get up close to Islam. And then she write, well, you were used. So when she heard that I had actually been to these places, and not that you have to be, you know, not there aren't Muslims close by, but then she responded, you were a useful idiot for them. When you are no use to them, they will treat you like a slab of meat. And it just got worse from there until I was like, okay, I'm done. It was just really like, and what did other people tell me? So other people responded to my response to Julie Bindel. What do you suggest Israel does? Commit national suicide? Do you honestly think Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the clue is in the name, and Hezbollah want to live peacefully with Israelis? Have you been to Israel? Well, which I have, but anyway. You don't need to slaughter children and parade their bodies through the streets to defend yourself. Extreme false equivalency. And of course, we know that Hamas did not slaughter children and parade their bodies through the streets to defend themselves. We also know that, yeah, so this is, but also the top thing, yeah, it just kind of digresses from here. Someone asked me if I would defend ISIS, and on it goes. So,
yeah. No,
I thought, okay, something is going on here, because it was so extreme. I thought, okay, there was a raid, there was a military raid in Israel. Some people were killed. That is, you know, that is, I get that, why that's front page news. I get why the people involved would be up in arms about it. But it's like, it was just like people were acting. I mean, you know, it was just like it was the worst thing that's ever happened ever to any people. And I was thinking like, and then just the floodgates. And I think you're right about how, just like, just to use an analogy with how under the guise of protecting quote unquote trans women, people can say all kinds of the most vile stuff about actual women. And I think sometimes I wonder if under the guise of being of wanting to stand with Israel, gives people also license to say and do the most eye-raising things in terms of Islam, which is what, 2 billion of us on the planet maybe are follow Islam. I don't know. So not a small amount. Anyway, I was really just like, I was just shocked. I would thought, this is serious. This is something has been unleashed, and I don't know if I just didn't notice it as much. I experienced it in 9/11, of course, at 9/11 and September 11th in my country. That was before we had Twitter and Facebook and all this stuff. So maybe it would have been just as severe then. I just wasn't. I was just limited to what my friends and family were saying, not everybody on Twitter. So anyway, I don't know if you've all, but it seems like you've also had a similar experience of just people saying the most.
Yeah,
you know, and I'm back. I'm like, you don't even know. Like, my jaw like drops, and I'm like, what is?
Not sure if this is going to answer your question or, you know, bring some clarity in terms of what's actually going on with some people. But if you look at it as a psychological process of dehumanizing others, then, you know, propaganda, or as I was saying before, the going back always to Hamas and terrorism, what it does is they keep divulging and promoting an image and a narrative that is about the other as being inferior, threatening, evil predator, a destructive offender. And so basically, like Huxley would say, the propaganda will thrives and hooks the targeted audience by offering false and incomplete evidence, distracting away from logical debate and seeking to influence by the mere repetition of catchwords and images. So now we need, you know, if you keep that in mind, then to me it becomes quite clear why we see those, you know, they are very repetitive. They're very, just the same script, you know, everybody seems to have been weeks now, pretty much incomplete evidence, distracting away from logical debate, seeking to influence by the mere repetition of catchwords and images. And, you know, if we're able to just keep that in mind, and when we encounter, you know, such a level of, let's say, it's not even a conversation, you know, such a level of mantras,
mania,
or, you know, fantasism and sloganeering, you know, there could be different terms that you could. It is all about, you know, that, and it does stoke legitimate fears in people. You know, that's also the other thing that we need to understand. It could be perceived threat, but there's also legitimate fear. They're very primal fears. So there is, you know, pretty much that's how, you know, what's at play and how it does occur then, or what you see playing out when you interact with people online. And you know, there is a lot of what propaganda also provides is the make believe that, you know, always there is a group of people participating to something which is really holy, solemn, heroic, and then makes it more palatable, if I can use that term, and also necessary to witness the mass murdering and slaughter of innocents. You know, the moment you keep attaching, you know, those catchwords and repetition of a certain image of a group as, you know, there is a lot, the concept of supremacy comes to mind. That group needs to do anything necessary to exterminate their enemy. And then, you know, you're required as well, and that's what most of us, or anyway, again, speaking for myself, I've been finding a lot of the imposition has been about almost a demand to be you know, to just observe the slaughter, and you know, the really well, you know, just I don't even know words in terms of some of the images I've seen that were really heart-wrenching. We are just demanded to look at them as if it's not happening, you know, just to remain totally untouched.
Yeah, I think that's true. That we don't want, they don't want us to kind of rain on their parade, so to speak, about bringing up these, you know, the history and the context and how, you know, about it just who the actual David and Goliath are in this scenario, because it's just kind of. Go ahead.
If I can go back to Douglas Murray before I forget,
yeah.
I think I
brought up a little tweet of his too, because apparently he thinks that Hamas and Britain are also at war, even though Hamas, of course, is let's to remind our viewers, is a resistance movement. It's a national. It formed to resist Israeli occupation, and it's a nationalist movement, which means it's about its goal is to have a Palestinian state. Hamas has no interest in Britain, other than it would be nice. They'd prefer if Britain didn't support Israel's occupation or to apologize to it. But the idea that somehow Hamas is a threat to Britain is something that really, I think, gets Douglas excited, apparently. And now, please continue. Tell us about Dougie here.
Again, you know, yeah, you would think that you would be able to articulate and have a more refined line of thoughts around, you know, the topic, and actually bring more humanity to it instead. And it appears to be, to me, you know, what comes to mind, you know, pretty much, very much entrenched himself into identity politics and culture wars, and and pretty much applying critical theory. He just criticizes everything to the absurd. You know, it's really making, you know, to a level which is really quite astonishing. But a quote that I thought is, it brings to mind Douglas Murray quite frequently these days, is pretty much going back to propaganda, that the description of deceitful and subversive propaganda is that the purveying of lies by conscienceless writers and speakers. And that's, to me, what Douglas Murray is at this point in time representing, a conscienceless writer and speaker. And that's what propaganda needs. You know, propagandist needs to be conscienceless. And there's a certain callousness and coldness about him, which is becoming very evident over the last weeks, which is very disturbing as well.
No, and he's a conservative, and there's conservatives who if I had to put myself in the box, I wouldn't fit in the conservative box. But as things change, the boxes change. But I always thought that, and again, I thought, okay, well, he was, so there's some people who are on that camp, there's certain people. I try not to have just be in an echo chamber. So there's certain people from outside who I think, okay, I'm largely going to disagree on a lot of things, but I try to, make a point of listening to them. And he was one of them. Jordan Peterson was another. There's a couple of others who I listened to, and it was like, and Jordan Peterson as well, for being a Christian, God-fearing man, he's also basically, for lack of, I think he almost basically said, go get them, kill them all or something to Netanyahu.
Yes. Yeah.
But just this, and again, this kind of thought-killing cliches, what you mentioned about Huxley, it's just that basically, what does he say? He just wants to keep on telling people, he really wants people to think of Hamas as ISIS, as Nazis, and as us. Somehow, this isn't just about this is something that all of the West and all of the civilized world and all this stuff needs to get into. And no matter what the cost, it seems like it seems like there's no war crime that's too that cannot be committed in the effort of this valiant cause. And there has to be men and women who are willing enough to do the things that need to be done, even if they're distasteful. And this justifying this kind of shrouding in glory, what is just barbarity. I mean, to the idea that we know, and people, if you take a bit of time, you also know that this is not a people with an army. Like they don't have an air force, they don't have a navy, they don't have any way of protecting themselves against aerial bombardment. The militia part of Hamas has guns and homemade rockets, like projectiles and hand grenades. That's what they have. So there's basically bombing and besieging a population that cannot protect itself or defend itself against that, and calling it some sort of noble, valiant war for civilization. It's disgusting. Yeah. It's just disgusting. I'm just like, what? And that so many people are in chorus, and this is still suitable. This is suitable for morning television and across the West. It's like, okay.
Yeah. What is becoming normalized, what they are, Murray and others are normalizing is pretty much, again, as propagandists, they're showing us that any decency and respect as a possibility of interaction and quality of communication goes out of the window when the group you're referring to is considered less than human. So, they are not deserving of any decency and respect and interaction.
And I get to hear an understanding of how kids and babies in Palestine are somehow a threat to Western civilization. But apparently that's what we're being invited to go along with, without thinking too much. Again, which I think is quite clear, important you bring up just the cliches and the mantras and the pictures that we hear over and over again. Yeah. Just kind of get us to be like, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. It's just, it's fine. Just support, don't look, don't question, go ahead. It's just, a lot.
It's quite interesting also, the projection, that they bring up, and the, lack of the incoherent, just like, wrong race and ethnicity is brought up when it's convenient, and then it is dismissed when it's not convenient. And that's why I was looking at, in-group and out-group dynamic that makes it pretty much, just like they decide when they can talk about, the right or wrong race or the right and wrong ethnicity. But if you bring that up in terms of the experiences of Palestinians or other groups, then it's not okay to talk about it. Why would you talk about it? It's all, it's again a very dishonest stance, I would say, in terms of how they are articulating, if they are articulating their position in any way. The other thing that I do find also interesting, in a very subtle way, they are, in my view, sending out the same message that we saw with lockdowns, that we saw with other things that happened over the last few years, which is all these atrocities, all this murdering is going under the banner of, which is not a new thing, it's not new at all, it's for your own good, it's for your safety. So safety and good comes up all the time. And that to me is something else that we need to be really careful about, because what we're seeing also in the language today is getting used, and it's pretty much, we're really entering what can be defined as a more totalitarian state where, free and transparent discussions and genuine disagreement have no place anymore. Yeah, so it's very much about that intellectual dishonesty, which I think is rampant at the moment, which is, and the genuine disagreement, as we were saying earlier on in the case of Wilkenstein, is then replaced with accusations, very often wild accusations, demonizing again, so that, the outgroup can become, or the person, the enemy becomes the cruel monster. And then you can do anything against cruel monsters. There is no limit.
Clearly.
And that's what that's the setup. That's what they're setting up for all of us. And if we really don't call that out and don't stand steady in understanding what's actually playing out, any of us could become the cruel monster one day. Yeah.
And if I just wanted to flex, I know that I'm aware that you have a limited time with us tonight, or today. I think that also just two things to flag, and maybe we can come back and do another episode, do a deep dive on a few of these issues, or one or two of them. I think also that we forget, or maybe we don't like to talk about that deviance is also something that we bond with. So if people who are participating in something like that, something like this being okay with what's going on in Gaza, and it binds people together, Again, I think it's kind of just an offshoot of the in-group, out-group, but that if you're willing to, if you have a cause, whatever that is, and the things you do to serve, if you think you have a noble cause, and so it causes you to lie, to spin, to justify killing, or to kill to engage in killing yourself, then you really need that cause to stay a cause. Because if that goes away, then you're just an asshole. Then you're just a nasty work. But if you're doing it for a reason, then it gives you get both sides of it. You get to feel noble and righteous, but also you get that bonding with the people who you're also engaging in these things that typically would be going against the norms of decent society, so to speak. So saying that babies are ticking time bombs, or that it's okay if the pregnant women are killed because they're they're filled with snakes, or whatever kind of thing, whatever kind of Nazi Der Stürmer imagery we're getting now. I think that's that's part of it. And also there was something else you said. Oh, you talked about what we're being invited to do and how totalitarian it is. And I'm also thinking this is it's kind of ironic in this case, but this idea that it's almost like a maternal way, or like a mean mother type of tyranny, how it's about being nice and about hate. Yeah, it's like we're not allowed to decide for ourselves what we like and don't like anymore, or who we hate and what we hate anymore. However, we're also at the same time being invited to hate a whole group of people that's being bombarded right now. Just kind of there's these. I think that's what's the morbid symptom of our culture, is that there's so many contradictory and mixed messages. But this idea about, and I get to the point, like, of course I have, hate's not, it's the same thing as saying like we shouldn't kill people. Of course we shouldn't kill people, and hate's bad. But however, there's also, it also serves a purpose in this idea. I'm so sick of being told what to like and not to like, and who to hate and who not to hate, and how. I'm just like, get away from me. Freedom is also to choose what and who you do not like. Which of course is different than epithets and signing violence, but it's just like, please get away. I don't have to like that. And I'm we should just to have, some civil disobedience. We just get together and take turns saying what we don't like.
Yeah.
I hate this.
Yeah.
I hate people who talk about hate speech all the time.
Good point. Yeah.
It's just there's something, the more, the I don't know, it's the kind of gaslighting. So especially when we're in the United States and also in the UK, that the more things become censorious, the more there's like cancellation, and the more the thing get in there, the more we're told that it's not the case. So we're what we experience happening, what we see happening, the official discourse is basically telling us no, it's not happening. And so you get this kind of this constant gaslighting that's going on, not just on this issue, but with the Ukraine one, with COVID, with the whole series of things. It's just this point where I'm going to be a bit off topic, so maybe I'll put a pin in that. But just this idea when we get to the position that you can't really believe, not just think that the whether it be the media or the political parties or university or whatever, or health, centers for health and public health and whatnot, not just that they make mistakes or are spinning things, but that they're actively working against your best interests.
Absolutely.
Then it's a bit like, and I think, anyway, I'm kind of, that digressed a bit, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, just really good points. That brings me back when you said about having freedom to dislike or hate whatever you want to, and then takes us back to the possibility of isolation, and which can be moral, physical, and psychological, which is playing in a bigger scale in Palestine at the moment. So the moment you don't want to get along with something, or you disagree, or you want to have that, as you said, like the freedom to dislike even something, the fear that comes up for most people, and that's why also some prefer to go along with things rather than getting informed and getting more information and understanding, is really to avoid that physical, moral, and psychological isolation. Which is, as human beings, we find very threatening. And I would say there are also legitimate reasons, as I said, if for whatever reasons, another group of people turns against you, it will be good to have the support of your kin, so people that stand with you and by you. So, that, as I said, that's why there are so many different layers to the conversation, which have been totally disregarded in terms of how and what, as humanity, as people, we can offer, what can be done really if we care about other people. One thing that I also wanted to bring up in terms of so-called anti-woke, or the opponents of critical race theory, such as Gassard, which I've been finding some of his so like, the ostrich parasitic syndrome will describe him pretty well, in my view. There's been a very deep. Sorry.
I'm trying to think if I put you sent me one of his tweets. I can't remember if I put it up here or not. Let's see if I added it. I have this one.
That was just something else.
Something else? Okay, never mind then. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there were some which were really quite, as I was saying, like, really, really pervert. I don't know. That's not that.
Yeah. No, he was having close. Like, would you rather have your kids go to Tel Aviv University or to some college in Gaza? These whole things. It's like just totally denying the fact of why Gaza.
I think there was something. Something which
Yeah.
was even more dreadful, more vile, which was around that Palestinian, or actually, I don't think it was only the Palestinians. It was actually more Muslim or Arabs children.
Yeah, he has an
Arab children are all born. They actually learn to hate in the womb.
God. Yeah.
Okay, so to make.
Is that where you have to ask him where he learned his hate? Anyway.
Look, that really left me really. It was really disconcerting. Actually, I don't even think I have the words to describe, reading such a thing that
children. We're going to need new words after this. That's for
sure. Learn to hate in the womb. But if you would have said that about, let's say, so-called white people, if you would have said that about Jews, if you would have said that about any other group of people, I think, we've been spending years about, listening to them criticizing how we shall not depict any group as inherently bad. And that, I think, applies to Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims. Why are we depicting an entire groups of people, populations, as being inherently bad, which is really that pervasive shame that you put on people, which is really quite devastating.
Well, I think the war on terror that started in 2001, I mean, it started a bit before that, and the discourse that went on with that, and how people were encouraged to go along with these, preventative wars. I think it's really the gift that keeps on giving, because it's one that people internationally in the West, not so often, at least, I don't know, that it seems to be that, there's different sets of rules for what you can get away with saying about a group of people that's like almost 2 billion people who we will identify as Muslim. And of course, not only Arabs are Muslim. I mean, I could decide to become a Muslim, but anyway, it's unlikely, but you never know. It's unlikely I become a Catholic as well. I've been, unaffiliated since birth. However, I do appreciate religions and respect them, and I find it interesting. It's a side note. But it's that it's all right. And on that note, Wesley Yang, who's also someone who I was quite a big fan of, and he has a Substack called Year Zero, I think, and he's been trying to get a handle on. He has his own theory about social justice gone awry and woke politics. I think he calls it Year Zero, and I can't remember his term. Anyway, and he was really good doing deep dives into gender identity, especially in terms of the so-called gender medicine and practice. Where anyway, and also had teamed up with, I think, Redux, which is a feminist publication, also quite good. And I was surprised. He also was someone from the very beginning. It was just like, like basically saying like no difference between what Netanyahu was saying and him was saying. And I was having a bit of back and forth with him, and he was just like, God's not a concentration camp. It's terrorists. That's why there's, like all this. It was just, he wasn't having it. And then there was this kind of special pleading. I think he was surprised that people about the level of criticism towards Israel vis-a-vis about Palestinians. The idea that a lot of people weren't making it about Hamas, like you said, we're looking at focusing on the Palestinians and the situation that's been going on there for 75 years. And I just want to put out, in terms of one of the indications of Israeli-Palestine derangement syndrome, is that just this lack of self-awareness and just the contradictoriness, because he was this kind of special pleading thing. So he says the left stands for universal equality and dignity of all human beings. It doesn't stand for the celebration of mass murder and rape of civilians of the wrong race or ethnicity. Right, guys? Right? So again, he's presuming that again, he's buying this hook, line, and sinker that Hamas and Palestinians just hate Jews, and they just, they just wanted to go on a pogrom. It's like that October 7th was some sort of pogrom, which it wasn't. And again, this thing about rape of civilians, all this stuff. I mean, he was actively putting some of those what later became communities that weren't actual or debunked videos of some of the things that were attributed to happening that day, and on. So again, it's the irony, is like universal equality and dignity of all human beings. Well, you would think that would also mean
yes.
Palestinians, and especially Palestinians who've been dealing with the brutal occupation for 75 years.
Absolutely.
Okay. But anyway, a few weeks before October 7th happened, he replied. He had some tweet about, it was something about something to come out about. I can't remember, something about trans kids. He was looking into again trying to debunk the idea that this idea that it's okay to block puberty and cross-sex hormones and all this stuff. There was some tweet about him highlighting some report that had come out about that. Yeah, it's not a good idea to pause puberty, and cross-sex hormones have long-term deleterious effects, etc., etc. And he responded to somebody, and he said, and I quote, "I'd say," he's like, what about people who, I can't remember the context, but he responded, that was the context of the tweet, he was responding to some trans rights activists, and he said, "I'd say they're useful idiots who don't learn about the subjects they opine on and just repeat manufactured talking points because it makes them feel good to attack others and to feel righteous with no regard for the harm they are doing." And I almost wanted to troll him because, when it's somebody who you trusted, who you held in high regard, who starts just sounding like the most base settler extremist or Netanyahu spokesperson, about twice or 2 or 3 times I just kept on tweeting his. Would put his tweet in the comment of tweets he was tweeting about how Hamas are terrorists and they're killers and all this stuff. And then I thought, no, I'm not going to become a troll. I'm just going to mute Wesley for a while and see if after the dust settles, if I can go back to, if I can compartmentalize this episode and take the other things I used to take his writing on seriously again. We'll see. And he probably might say something, But I was just really the level of dissonance here, I thought was quite amazing.
Yes, absolutely. That basically, in a way, just practicing everything they used to, that they, say they oppose or they're against, they disagree with, in the same way that do hold children responsible for the perceived action of their parents. Yeah, also that is really morally reprehensible. But they're holding Palestinian children as responsible, even if that was the case, for something that, like their grandparents or whoever did, which I thought they used to call that white guilt. So now we can reframe white guilt, we can call it Palestinian guilt.
Palestinian guilt, yeah. They're born with the original sin of being what the Zionists wanted their nation state.
Yeah.
and not just going away, They could have just gone away and just went to all the Arab countries, but they didn't. Some of them stayed and, made things difficult. So, and again, I remember there's this quote. It's not from Barry Weiss, but there's some quote, I think maybe from Golda Meir, that they'll never forgive the Palestinians for making them kill their children. Yeah, for making them become murderers or something, like, because they wouldn't leave. I'm not getting the quote right, but there was something like this. I know you have to go in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I just want to, in terms of, I think that to kind of crescendo on something that Barry Weiss said. And Barry Weiss used to be New York Times columnist, and I can't remember anyway, she might say she got canceled. I can't remember the exact term, but she started her own thing. And she's very much pro-Israel, pro-Zionist to the bone.
Yeah.
And I'll just read this part here. So someone said so she writes, again, the results of this mess, as always, are especially bad for the Palestinians who live under Hamas rule. One thing. We'll just leave that to the side. Because casualty reports are hard to verify because Hamas controls the media. Sure. And even the international press, really, inside Gaza. Yes, but it appears more than 50 Palestinians have been killed. So I don't know what event this was talking about. Oh, this is May 21st. So this is from May 21st. This is from a prior event to when, to every once in a while. Basically, people who don't know, I'm sure people, that Israel can go into Gaza whenever they want. If they want to, they can bomb Israel. They can go in there with tanks or planes if they're willing to deal with some Hamas snipers. They can, do what they want. But anyway, so some military campaign must have happened in May of 2021. So Barry writes, some of these people are entirely innocent non-combatants, including children. This is an unspeakable tragedy. And here's the important part, I think, that we could probably write a couple of books about. It is also one of the unavoidable burdens of political power of Zionism's dream to turn into the reality of self-determination. And I was thinking that, again, this kind of shrouding in valor or in glory or transcendence the dirty work of actually having to, take people's land, ethnically cleanse, all the stuff that's gone, all these what she would call political burdens of Zionism in order to attain their dream of having bigger Israel from the river to the sea. And also I think they would, if they had their druthers, they'd also like to incorporate Lebanon and probably Sinai. Because if I remember correctly, didn't Moses get the Torah on Sinai? Isn't that the story? Or sorry, for the believers who might be on there. So my guess is they want that part too. Anyway, but that everything that goes into service of this is just the unavoidable burden of political power. It's unspeakable, but it's an unavoidable burden. And I mean, any atrocity looking back now that we would say is an atrocity, people, I'm sure they would say that. I'm sure that the Third Reich said that Pol Pot said that I know that my government, when they were deciding to drop the atomic bomb, said that, or everything. It's like, or with we have to fight in Vietnam because of the domino thing, and we're protecting the capitalist free world. And so if we have to, carpet bomb and use Agent Orange, well, it's just an unavoidable burden. It's a tragedy. Some men, thank God that there's certain men and women who just have to, take on these burdens. So that we can attain this glory. Oh my God.
Correct. Those are, again, they're heroes, and they're sacrificing themselves for us. So the theme is always that sacrifice, the sacrifice for your own safety, which then brings us, before we finish for today, I guess, to the biggest thing that we're seeing unfolding, which is, the genocide and denial of genocide. Because, by framing things, as you said, as unavoidable burdens, what I hear, what I read in that is pretty much, just the denying what's happening to people, denying that they're being exterminated,
and also the idea that even though the people who are being killed, he still has to focus on the burden that this puts on Israelis.
Yeah,
it's like, I find it, I'm glad that she typed it, or that she wrote it. I think that this is it's something to really, I think that that everyone should be taking this sentiment and quite seriously. And this, of course, like you said before, this is not something new. We're just seeing it play out in real time. And
somebody said that, just the face with inconvenient history, the first defense is silence. I would say that we're just seeing the face with inconvenient history. The first defense is denial, because they're denying what's happening. And what's happening is actually a level of atrocity which I had never really seen in my lifetime, just playing overtly, just in front of our eyes. And,
No, and it's the idea that knowing it's happening and seeing it's happening, and then seeing people continue, so not just the Douglas Murrays and the Piers Morgans and whatnot, but the prime ministers and presidents, and even you have organizations at the UN. Even though the UN's own staff are being killed, they have yet to come out and say forcibly enough. And it's just like, and so it's the idea that knowing it's going on, not to know what like you're seeing it's going on, it's going on. What can you do? And then being gaslit about it. So we're being encouraged to, like you said, to be silent, not to worry, or to be, we're being told it's not what it is. We're still being told that, Israel does everything it can to avoid civilian casualties. People still saying that. It's like, well, if that's the case, and they're the worst people at that ever, because, and then even though it's this idea that when you're being lied to, and it's, I don't know what to me, if it's again about another indication that we're getting towards tyranny, when they don't even have to come up with good propaganda. They just say it, even though it's ridiculous. They just keep on saying it. And a couple of other people say it. And so we're just like, well, but that's obviously not the case.
Yeah, and that's what's also sinister. What's very sinister in all this, what is really inhumane, is by denying, as a continuation of a genocide, that denial is pretty much, denying the members of, let's say, Palestinians, so the members of a group, even the memory of the murders of their relatives. So everything is wiped out. Yeah, because if you deny that that has taken place, even the memory of what has been done to your relatives, to family members, is concealed. It didn't never happen. It's denied.
Yeah.
And I do find that, particularly inhumane and very sinister.
Well, Maya, we are at 1 hour 15 minutes, and I need to go. So thank you very much. I don't know if there's anything else that was a fine point to end on, or if you have anything else you want to add on this, trying to come to grips with why so many people seem to be so nonchalant, to actually almost invigorated by the atrocities we see going on in Gaza, and then also in the West Bank now as well.
Yeah, and there could be many more conversations about it, how all this, warmongering and fear-mongering, does in some ways bring relief to individual anxieties and fears, and again, as I was saying, that sense somehow of the illusion of being part of something. Yeah. And we've seen it also with COVID, that people were being heroes by spending time in their pajamas. It's
getting the sixth jab. It's like, okay.
Well, all of a sudden, the ones of us that were on the front line, day in, day out, working 10 to 12 hours, we became all murderers. That's something that I still can't shake.
There's so much going on now that it's hard to keep track of it all. But thank you very much, Maya, for coming on. I hope we can do this again. This is a kind of a good kind of overview and a bit of highlights of not to pick on anybody in particular, but just ones that struck out at me again, because the people that were that I was kind of some of that I was most taken aback about how quick, just being repeating everything that the United States and the UK and the United States governments were saying, and just hardly anybody speaking up for the innocent and the put upon, and just the baby. And I'm not going to go wax on here. We know just the inhumanity, I guess, is the word we can use until we have a better one. Just the inhumanity and the disregard and the willingness to go along and to pretend that it's not happening, or that it's really not that bad, or that if it is, then they deserve it. It's their own fault.
Correct.
Is something that we'll have to reckon with. I only hope that if this works out, I don't know. It depends, because again, the victor gets to write history, so we'll see. But if this gambit blows up in Israel's face, pardon the pun, hopefully not that way, and then these people are going to have to, if it actually comes out, and it's not just general opinion, but more people, I'm sorry, I'm rambling on. It'll just be interesting to see how people react if what they're doing now becomes in the year or 6 months from now, foreboding. If it becomes like not suitable for work anymore, not suitable for polite society anymore. If it's all just going to be memory hold, we're just going to go on to the next thing and pretend that it didn't happen, or if there's going to be some sort of reckoning. But again, of course, that's not something that you or I can foresee. But,
lovely.
Hopefully there is. You would think that something has to break over this, but we'll see.
Yes, and hopefully, as I say, like people will start moving, from those tried talking points to actually what matters, which is people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Tara.
Thank you, Maya. See you next time, and work well, you worker on a Saturday.
Yes.
See you next time. Thank you. All right. So, thank you for tuning in. This was the Morbid Symptoms Podcast, our 9th episode. And again, I'm learning as I go. But I hope that you found it worthwhile. I did, talking to Maya about this issue, about what we're tentatively calling Israeli-Palestine derangement syndrome that we're seeing large swaths of people who I would say who should know better, maybe do know better, just seem to be incapable or unwilling to treat this issue with any kind of nuance, and also to base it on what's actually going on in the present and the past historical record of 75 plus years that is readily available. Anyway, take care, and I will see you next time. Good night or good morning, as the case may be.